Quiero darles la bienvenida por estar aquí con nosotros esta noche. Este evento va a ser en inglés, como creo que anunciamos, pero así que voy a comenzar introduciendo primero a nuestra invitada de hoy y posteriormente pues el formato va a ser, ella va a hacer una presentación, nosotras vamos a estar hablando, vamos a tener un pequeño conversatorio y hacia el final vamos a abrir también los micrófonos para que ustedes hagan todas las preguntas que tengan. Esta es una nueva serie de programación del museo en donde estamos buscando traer a personas que se distinguen internacionalmente para que nos ayuden a nosotros aquí en Puerto Rico pues a repensar lo que puede ser el campo de la cultura y lo que puede ser específicamente también nuestra institución. Brooke Kamin Rapaport es una vieja colega mía, llevamos trabajando juntas ya como 8 años y ella ha sido realmente una persona ultra generosa con todo el campo de arte en espacios públicos internacionalmente y conmigo específicamente fue muy generosa dándome la bienvenida a ese campo cuando transicioné de un museo a trabajar con este tipo de arte fuera de las paredes de un museo. Así que pues nada, comienzo y voy a hacer el cambio a inglés. Muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí. I'm going to go ahead and start. Okay. Brooke Kamin Rapaport is an American curator and writer. In winter 2025, she was a visiting scholar at the American Academy in Rome, where she advanced research on a book on public art and democracy. She was artistic director and Martin Friedman chief curator at Madison Square Park Conservancy in New York from 2013 to 2024. Rapaport was responsible for outdoor public sculptures of commissioned works by countless contemporary artists, including Diana Al-Hadid, Maria Magdalena Campos Pons, Leonardo Drew, Teresita Fernandez, Hugh Hayden, Cristina Iglesias, Maya Lin, Josiah McElhenney, Martin Poirier, Shazia Sikander, and Rose B. Simpson, among many others. So their program is absolutely amazing, and it's one of the, I would say, the leading program of commissioned public works in public space in the United States. She founded the Public Art Consortium, which is a national initiative of museums, public art, and sculpture park curators in 2017. And I had the pleasure, and I'm still part of that group, I had the pleasure of joining the group in 2018. So I've learned quite a bit from my colleagues in that field. And again, thanks for putting that together for us and for our work. In 2019, Rapaport served as commissioner and curator of Martin Poirier Libertad, representation in the U.S. Pavilion for that year's Venice Biennial. Rapaport was the editor and lead essayist for Public Art and Public Space, 20 years advancing work in New York's Madison Square Park, published by Gregory Miller and Company in 2024 on the 20th anniversary of the Conservancy's Public Art Program. So without further ado, I would like to welcome to our stage my friend and colleague, Brooke Kamin Rapaport. Thank you, Maria.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Maria and I are going to speak together after I deliver some remarks and show you slides. So thank you, Maria, for welcoming me today. Congratulations to you and your colleagues and board and neighbors on this spectacular institution. And I'm so grateful to be here this evening and to share the work that I realized as artistic director and chief curator at New York's Madison Square Park Conservancy. So the program in Madison Square Park invites artists to create temporary new work on site in a 6.2-acre public park. People experience the work by plan or unexpectedly. Artists make a proposal for how a project's imagery, ideas, materials will impact shared space. And it's key to work with artists who understand the power and great vulnerabilities to their practice when working in public. I'm going to share some highlights of the public art program and raise questions that circle around publicness, accessibility, and democratic viewing. And I can't imagine beginning today without recognizing a context for this presentation. We are living in and breathing in perilous times. The adaptability and need for civic sites in public parks, on museum campuses, in cities and streets across the countryside has only heightened in recent years and over the last weeks. We need to affirm the role of open space as a necessity for artists and students, families and communities, protesters, workers, and neighbors. And our role as students and teachers, curators, artists, writers, supporters, neighbors, and our essential power as individuals is to uphold a continued conversation by artists, some of whom use the availability of outdoor space for collective and private reckoning. How can we take these times and put our practices to work? Public art can carry stunning inspiration and take on dialogue around politics and culture and social space because it's out in full view. It's not physically harbored by an institution. And artists who show outdoors often bring work of great nuance from the deepest spaces that reflect the consciousness of what is humanity. Madison Square Park Conservancy's public art program was launched in 2004. Since that time, there have been 50 commissioned projects, 50 artists who demonstrate the soaring range of human creativity and capacity accessible to all. There are 60,000 people who traverse Madison Square Park every day, and this broad range of eyes and minds seeing their work is invigorating to artists. Commissioning dynamic artists to create temporary new art invites and encourages interpretation from a wide range of communities. There's a sacred but unwritten, even unspoken contract between the artist and the public when a work is installed outdoors. And this looms over every decision that's made. There are practical matters of engineering for structural soundness and resistance to extreme weather, and of acknowledging that people can be hard on works of art by physically climbing or upending or tagging them or by calling out work on social media. The public commission means that art is constructed and completed in full view. Typically, the artist and the public, neighbors, workers, out-of-towners, unsheltered people, students, elders, families, artists, athletes, and art world players see the final work together for the first time during the installation period. When people intellectually, emotionally, or physically engage on site by posting images online, leaping from the undulating plains of Leonardo Drew's City in the Grass, sitting on the colorful stools in Arlene Sheckett's Full Steam Ahead, recognizing personal reflection in Teresita Fernandez's Fata Morgana, staring into the past and the future in Paula Hayes's Gazing Globes, enjoying spoken word, music, and dance in Josiah McElhenney's Prismatic Park, or lingering in the mass of climate-starved trees in Maya Lin's Ghost Forest. This is when a work in public space assumes complete power. An exhibition by Mark DeSuvero officially launched the art program, and the first years brought work by Saul LeWitt and Ursula von Reidingsvard. These are art world titans whose work had been tested for public space. The first projects in the park were largely non-representational, and this became the foundation for the art program, a platform of strength on which to build, reflect on, and evaluate. Over the last 20 years, there have been light-based projects. There have been projects based on the figure. Film, video, and sound works. performance, and social practice. Nature-themed exhibitions. There have been projects in unexpected materials that tested outdoor conditions. And works with political, social, or economic themes. Last year, for the 20th anniversary of the art program, we commissioned artists who demonstrate a great range of contemporary art making. Ana Maria Hernando's To Let the Sky Know, Dejar que el cielo sepa, opened in January 2024. Hernando creates sculpture in an abundance of tulle, the sumptuous fabric netting inspired by natural forms and transformed through the sewing process. Across the lawns in Madison Square Park, she formed a series of beauteous atmospheric clouds and a cascading waterfall that floated above and alongside viewers. Tulle is a material often associated with hiding secrets by concealing aspects of women's identity. But Ana Maria Hernando daylighted tulle with this project. Rose B. Simpson from Santa Clara Pueblo in New Mexico realized 7 18-foot-high sentinels in steel for Madison Square Park and Inwood Hill Park in Upper Manhattan. These towering figures reach and gathered around a central figure in bronze who emerged from the ground plane of the park. The figures in seed are in the present while anticipating the future from bronze masks patinated in turquoise. And the faces looking in are youth. Those gazing outward are protectors. They all summon narratives, layers of narratives, personal and collective human experiences that have seeded Rose Simpson's life and work. She refers to visual languages reflecting her training as a contemporary artist and as a native artist, building fortitude through this assembled group. Maria Magdalena Campos Pons realized a performance, Procession of Angels for Radical Love and Unity, in September of 2024, beginning in Harlem Art Park and concluding in Madison Square Park. The public was invited to participate, and the artist invited musicians, dancers, and poets to join her on the 7-mile journey across 2 mornings. Nicole Eisenman installed a 100-foot-long red link belt crane from 1969 on the park's central lawn. Eisenman's sculptures are attached to the boom and the cab, and inside is a tableau of an old woman roasting a weenie over a cast iron stove. Eisenman nods to Marcel Duchamp's ready-made, the term Duchamp used in 1916 to describe mass-produced, commercially available, often utilitarian objects that would become a work of art. Eisenman's ready-made grows to the extreme scale of an industrial crane. She is inserting the machine in the garden, but now the machine rests like a dinosaur, a relic of progress. Overall, the works on view are experiments. We hear from the public loud and clear through interactions on site, anecdotes, social media posts, and emails. This open interaction and opinion making are hallmarks of democracy, and it finishes the work on view. One of the greatest honors for me was to work with the venerable American artist Martin Purrier on Big Bling, his 2016 project for Madison Square Park. Typically, Martin constructs sculpture for the ages with enduring materials. This project was different because he considered it a temporary work. Big Bling was made of laminated plywood and chain link fence with a gold leaf shackle at the pinnacle of the sculpture. This was his largest temporary sculpture at 40 feet high. It achieved colossal scale and elicited a range of profound interpretations. Contrast and contradiction are embedded in Big Bling, stately and overwhelming, rough-hewn and refined, raw and polished, restrained and liberated, figurative and abstract. Martin again realized spectacular work, mostly using many types of woods, and I worked with him, as Maria said, as curator and commissioner of the United States Pavilion at the 2019 Venice Biennale on the exhibition titled Martin Purrier, Liberty, Libertà. Here, he brought insight into ideas around liberty, democracy, and identity through sculpture installed inside and outdoors in the pavilion's forecourt. Back in Madison Square Park the next year, Abigail DeVille's Light of Freedom opened in fall of 2020 at the height of the pandemic. After New York, the work traveled to the Momentary at Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art in Bentonville, Arkansas, to the National Mall at the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden in Washington, D.C., and to the Gund Gallery at Kenyon College in Ohio. And Light of Freedom will open soon at Princeton University. The realization of this project took just 4 months from the invitation to the artist in June 2020 to the opening date in October 2020. This was the most accelerated project we planned and implemented in the history of the art program as we discussed the question of how public art can respond to a period of intense turmoil, the presidential election, the pandemic, and the Black Lives Matter movement. Abigail responded with a piece created with her signature material of objects sourced from different sites. Light of Freedom is a 13-foot-high reference to the Statue of Liberty. The statue's hand and torch were on view in Madison Square Park from 1876 to 1882, seen in this postcard image from the 1880s. Abigail filled her torch and flame with a reused, well-worn bell and the arms of mannequins painted blue. She recognized and hallowed the earliest enslaved Africans who were brought to New Amsterdam in 1626, and she critiqued the promise of American liberty and justice for all. She is a citizen archaeologist. Maya Lin was one of the first artists I reached out to when I began at Madison Square Park Conservancy in 2013. She was not interested initially because she only created permanent projects, and she would not plan for a temporary piece. But she called several years later to let us know that she wanted to bring a ghost forest to New York City. Ghost Forest was a towering stand of 49 haunting Atlantic white cedar trees. Maya brought her vision as an artist and her agency as an environmental activist to this project, a memory of germination, vegetation, and abundance, and a harsh symbol of the devastation of climate change. The height of each tree, around 40 feet, overwhelmed human scale and stood as a metaphor for the outsized impact of a looming environmental calamity. In nature, a ghost forest is the evidence of a dead woodland that was once vibrant. The trees in ghost forests were all slated to be cleared as part of a regeneration effort in the fragile ecosystem of the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. The next project, Shazia Sikandar's Hava, to breathe air life, was installed in Madison Square Park and on the rooftop of the Appellate Division Courthouse across the street in 2023. Hava means air or atmosphere in Urdu and Eve in Arabic, Hebrew, and other languages. The work unites female figures and motifs from nature and confronts symbols of power and justice to examine longstanding practices impeding the advancement of women. In Witness, a steel hoop skirt with mosaic detail adorned a golden female. Her skirt is inspired by the historic courtroom's stained glass ceiling dome with its lines resembling longitudinal and latitudinal lines on a globe. Women especially described how they located themselves conceptually and emotionally within the imagery of the sculpture, an idealized golden female figure with arms and legs resembling tree roots, wearing a hoop skirt and determinedly facing forward into the future. We see few monuments to women, and this work became a beacon. When the sculpture was on view in New York, healthy debate developed on social media, in public forums, and in the New York Times among those who questioned and those who defended the project. Witness became an imposing symbol, and thousands of people experienced the sculpture daily during the months it was on view between January 17th and June 4th, 2023. Hava was then installed on the University of Houston campus from February 2024 through October 2024. The university, Maria, co-commissioned that project with us. When installation of Sikander's project began there, members of Texas Right to Life and other groups made their opposition known with a vocal and physical presence. The artist's female figure was wearing a jabot, a decorative judicial collar favored by Supreme Court Justices Sandra Day O'Connor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Ginsburg's pro-abortion stance led some onlookers to equate the meaning of the statue and the artist's intention as pro-choice. That the installation of the work occurred during a presidential campaign became heavy ballast weighing on the work. Opponents of the artwork, both students and not, called on others to dispute the sculpture, framing it as a satanic abortion idol. In July 2024, as Hurricane Beryl made landfall in Houston, an unidentified individual ignored 80-mile-per-hour driving winds and pummeling rainfall to scale the frame of Witness's voluminous skirt. They hurled a sledgehammer at the figure's neck, ultimately beheading her, knocking away her sentience, her will, and her power. Her golden head with a placid countenance and hair braided in a style that conjured ram's horns toppled to the ground. Here was a violent example of how popular beliefs and opinions, hallmarks of a democracy that centers freedom of expression, were used as a justification for damaging a sculptural object. And that the work was on view outdoors provided the open arena for this action. The artist vowed to leave the sculpture on view as evidence of the act. In every way, the debate around works of art in civic space where people are granted access exemplify our political moment, swirling around questions of identity and community, representation and history, prominence and power, belonging and exclusion. Calls for the installation or the removal of art in public space in our time involve societal values offered in the safe space of democratic exchange, where artists are commissioned for the power or beauty of their work, and the public can exploit that to heighten controversy. Context is everything, and approval by the art world isn't necessarily affirmation within a broader population. And the site where a work is installed becomes another crux of interpretive means, on a courthouse facade, or in front of a campus art building, within a public park or on a city street, in a downtown plaza, or adjacent to a city hall. Despite the firm grip of our online lives, objects installed in shared space are just as influential conductors for transformation as for rancor. Artists will continue to confront and consider, celebrate and conquer, construct and critique as they create new work in civic space. That's the role of public art. Fundamental tensions that uphold democracy inspire the artists who realize new art, motivated by the site. An exhibition that lasts for several months will withstand admiration, contemplation, critique, and even condemnation. In an urban park, the myriad assessments are met equally by the artists and through the public. That completes the work on view. Artists often sit in the park after the installation of their work and listen to the public response. These are the sweetest and harshest moments. Fundamental concerns arise, questions are tedious and thoughtful, lovers and haters are stirred. That's the glory of public art and the essential urgency of publicness. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke, for walking us through
Of course.
years of work
Yes.
at Madison Square Park. I was taken back to many of the commissions that I had an opportunity to see and admire up close.
Yeah.
See the highs and, of course, the lows of
Right.
the work that we've done together.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to begin with one idea which you've already kind of touched upon a little bit about how public art or art in public space is inherently democratic and human-centered. Having said that, I wanted to see if we could maybe nuance a little bit more. What, in your opinion, do you think distinguishes, or what does it achieve versus more private or more traditional modes of creation? What can it bring to the table, the fact that it's out in public space?
You know, when you think of public art, the first question that people ask is, what's private art? So private art may be something where a museum or a collector harbors works of art indoors, in an indoor space. So that sets up an immediate difference, because when the works are on view in public space, they have to be able to withstand not only, as I mentioned, weather, intensity of an engineering protocol that a city will demand, and you have to get approved, but also interpretation from people. In Madison Square Park, we always include exhibition signage and a lot of materials on a website, but people come to the work and they have immediate reactions to what's on view. So there is, in a way, this unspoken contract between the artist and the public, unwritten, unspoken, but implicitly understood, that this work will be able to and will have to withstand a range of interpretive ideas.
As we saw, some really wonderful interpretations and some not as wonderful ones.
Yeah.
So in the 11 years that you were head of the art program at Madison Square Park, as we saw, you engaged artists whose work worked figurative, sometimes abstract, or was involved with light, was maybe ephemeral or made out of more durable material, a whole kind of panoply of creative options for these artists. And yet, I think that at the core of many of these proposals, there was a central concern with bringing people together, with connection, which I think, having known you for these years, I think reflects your own generosity of spirit and caring nature. Could you share your perspectives on art as a vehicle for redemptive ideas or broader ideas such as hope, dignity, or justice? And the second part of that question is, to what degree do you think that your conversations with the artists that you have worked with over the years inform those choices, or embrace or inspired them to embrace a lot more loftier ideas?
The responsibility I always felt as a curator of a public art program was to demonstrate the range of art making today, the multiplicity through materials, as you said, not only what you would anticipate materials to be, bronze and polyester, resin, perhaps wood, but also we had artists who worked in fiber, in textiles, artists who incorporated plant materials into their work. There was figuration, there was abstraction, performative pieces, video, augmented reality. So that was significant to bring forward artists whose work differed significantly from each other to be able to begin the public conversation. As well, those works were by a range of artists geographically, international artists, by gender, by ideas, by conceptual means through their work. So that was all significant. But the bottom line, when you're a curator of contemporary art, is that you must heed the artist and their work. Listen carefully to what the artists are showing, and the work will be powerful, significant, and enduring.
Thank you. Okay, I wondered if we could go back for a moment. Maybe you want to perhaps change the slide to talk about the Venice Biennial. I wanted to ask you more specifically about your experiences realizing that incredible project by Martin Perrier. There we go. Kind of locating us here in the periphery of the international art circuit, but also kind of operating as a bridge between cultures and being part of the American nation, but at the same time always kind of distanced from that, kind of looking at ourselves also from a maybe more international context. I wanted to kind of bring that experience home and ask you what, if you could reflect on what it meant to be creating a project for the international art circuit, and more specifically to what did it mean to work with Martin, whose ideas on culture, I think, are very strong and can really show us a way during this our present moment of civil unrest.
Martin Perrier was in his late 70s when we realized the 2019 U.S. Pavilion at the Venice Biennale. He's born in 1941. So he hadn't, at that time, he had already received a MacArthur Foundation Fellow. He was a winner of the National Medal of Arts. He'd had a retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art, and was considered a venerable, influential American sculptor. Significantly, his work had not been seen enough in an international context. This was one reason why it was important to bring his work to Venice, to demonstrate the power in his sculptures. So when you look at this work, these are different pieces that were in the Biennale, in the U.S. Pavilion in 2019, and the towards the right is the work that was called Swallowed Sun, that was outdoors in the forecourt of the U.S. Pavilion. For a long time, Martin's work had been considered non-representational, and there was a trajectory of interpretation around that. But what was important for us to think about in Venice was that even though pieces may be considered non-representational, there was enormous content in these sculptures having to do with history, liberty, issues of identity, and democracy. And that was what was crucial to talk to people about in not only the exhibition tours we gave, but in the exhibition catalog and in wall labels that people read. So I think that now when viewers come to Martin's work, there's an interpretive framework around it that's more open-ended, probably than was before 2019.
Okay. And also for those of you in the audience, 2019, that specific project organized by Madison Square Park, and you specifically, was the first time that a let's just say traditional museum was in charge of the commission for the United States.
An enormous honor for us to come to Venice and to, show Martin's work. Martin's work was in the Sao Paulo Biennial in the late 1980s, but this was a spectacular exhibition that he realized in Venice.
Really beautiful, but I think that maybe one of the contributions of your perspective coming from the field of public art in that international context was also to share with the participants, the audience of that specific biennial, the immediacy of art in public space, which may have been lacking in other presentations of the U.S. Pavilion, having been organized by more traditional institutions.
You must remember that everyone who comes to the Venice Biennale pays a hefty entrance fee to get in. So there's already an understanding that people come to see the work in the Giardini in Venice a bit differently than they would come by happenstance or by plan to a space like Madison Square Park.
Yeah. Okay, so I would like for us to talk about Shazia Sekander's Hava.
Yes.
Which was, as you mentioned, was a project that we worked on together. We co-commissioned it for Madison Square Park and also for the University of Houston, which was where I worked before coming back home to Puerto Rico.
Right.
The commission explored how justice means many things to many people, and how justice has traditionally been unequally applied as well. And to our surprise, despite of the sculpture's sheer monumentality and beauty, it actually elicited a wide range of responses, especially in Houston, where, as you mentioned, it was eventually beheaded. What is it, in your opinion, about difference and otherness that makes so many people in the United States, which is, as you know, a country of immigrants, formed through this difference? What is it that makes many audiences or many segments of the population in the United States so uncomfortable with difference and otherness?
Important to step back a little bit. In 2017, Shazia Sekander was on a commission in New York City called the Mayoral Advisory Commission on City Art, Monuments, and Markers. And this group was chaired by the head of the Department of Cultural Affairs, Tom Finkelpearl, and Darren Walker of the Ford Foundation at the behest of Mayor de Blasio. And the idea, sort of the charter for that group of, I think, 18 committee members, including Shazia, was to reconsider public works in New York City that were in 21st century eyes controversial, hurtful, and perhaps should be removed. So the intense work that this committee did was background for Shazia, who came to have great knowledge that there were very few monuments to women in public space in New York City. And I think that seeded ideas around, one of the ideas around why she wanted to create monumental female figures in public space. So because this piece witnessed 18 feet high and then an 8-foot high work that was installed on the courthouse the appellate division courthouse across the street, because they had a decorative collar that people associated with RBG, that set off some of the controversy around that these were somehow representative of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her political ideas. So people come in. What we know when we install a work of public art in a site in New York, a site in Houston, space in Bentonville, Arkansas, wherever it may travel, is that audience reaction, viewer reaction will be different wherever site. So the context of the site is enormous in understanding the work that's on view. And I think that that had impact when Shazia's piece was installed and ultimately beheaded in Houston.
Because I remember thinking back when it opened in New York already from the very beginning, there were already some factions from the maybe extreme right that imbued meaning beyond what Shazia intended for this work, imbued meaning into the work. But by the time the sculpture got to Houston, I think there was already this kind of alternate narrative that was perhaps informing appreciation of the work.
I think that's right. What we did see, you see on the right here, the slide. This was a high school class who had come to a public high school class who had come to the park, and they took their picture in front of the work in 2023. But what we did see were droves of women who gathered around the sculpture, some bringing daughters or mothers, friends, to take their photograph in front of that work, because there was a pride in her beauty and also that she was a female monument or anti-monument, however you prefer to describe it.
How she could persevere and be so imposing, but at the same time so gentle.
That's right. That's right. And forward-looking, looking into the present and into the future. Yeah.